Thank you. Hello, I'm Sally Berkman. On behalf of the Earth Care Committee and the Forum, I welcome you to a program entitled Hannah Suthers, Bird Woman of the Sourlands. Walking into her kitchen in early morning, I saw a leather strap of sleigh bells hanging from a cabinet knob. Attached to each bell was a small cloth bag, itching with the anxiety of its contents. On the table were tiny measuring instruments and scattered papers ready to receive important data. Hannah Suthers, Bird Woman of the Sourlands, was again preparing to examine the little birds caught in the mist nets that morning. In 1977, Hannah was the founder of the Featherbed Lane Bird Banding Station, now one of the longest running, privately run bird banding stations in the country. For years, she rode her horse along Featherbed Lane, tallying birds and noting the changing forest before commuting to Princeton University. Hannah was born in Iowa and lived her early years in Hawaii. And yes, she vividly remembers Pearl Harbor. She received her education at Oberlin College, graduating in 1953 and concluding most recently in 1998 with master's equivalencies in both biology and theology. Over the years, she has variously been a nursery school teacher, a missionary in Brazil, and for many years a researcher in the Department of Biology at Princeton, focusing on slime molds. But surely her best job continues to be working with the birds in the banding project, which is now in its 45th year. The crest of the Sourland Mountains above Hopewell, New Jersey, provides an excellent locale for supporting 74 bird species, as well as an additional 51 species of migratory birds. Hannah's work with the birds and observations of the woods and meadows has proved invaluable to the Delaware and Raritan Greenaway and other conservation organizations as they keep the area from further development. To learn more about Hannah's contributions and how she's done it, please welcome Hannah Suthers.
Thank you for the introduction, Sally. Is that really me? All right, I will jump into the topic of the evening, old field succession and changing bird life. These are maps of the 100-acre William Park Farm, which was established in 1768 on both sides of Featherbed Lane, 2 miles north of Hopewell Borough. The farm was abandoned in the late 1960s. Aerial photos taken in 1930 on the left and 2007 on the right show how the farm fields have succeeded back to shrubland and forest. The area outlined in yellow is now preserved because of my data, and it's a county open space called Sommer Park. And now I will show you a brief pictorial summary of the bird banding research on this old farm. And the supporting data that I'm going to be talking about are in my published papers. So you know the adage, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. Okay, if one yellow-breasted chat in the hand is worth two in the bush, it follows that one pair of scarlet tanagers in hand are worth two pairs in the bush, right? And one family of blue-winged warblers in hand are worth two families in the bush. Then everybody call it out loud. 4 white-throated sparrows in the hand are worth how many in the bush? 8, no? Then hundreds of birds in the hand every year, over 31,000 birds in 44 years of bird banding in Hopewell, are worth a motherload of useful information. Let me tell you how. When I came back from Brazil to New Jersey in the 1970s, I got a horse right away, and while riding through the abandoned farm fields on horseback, I noticed that the fields were changing. I wanted to get a handle on it. I saw these little red cedars growing in little trenches, and I thought, oh, it's a Christmas tree farm. I better watch out where I'm stepping. I listed the trees and the forbs as they came into bloom, and then the grasses, and I listed the birds. And the joke was on me. It was birds that distributed the red cedars in abandoned fields. And of course, they're going to grow where it's wet in the drainage ditches, right? So at one point of time, serendipitously, I could compare fields 10 years from last disturbance, 20 years, 40 years, 60 years. So it was natural to start a project to compare these fields of different ages. In 1978, I started spot mapping the singing male birds. And this is how 47 species were distributed in about 100 acres during the breeding season. And hedgerows and telephone poles made the grids of the map. In 1987, as shrubs and saplings provided more nesting places, birds piled into a maximum of 72 species. Tonight, I'll be talking about the neotropical migrants who make up less than 1/2 of the numbers and species. It's the left-hand chart shows the numbers. The deep purple are the neotropical birds. These are birds that breed here and winter in Central and South America, are migratory birds. The biomass, the number of birds, rises with succession and then dwindles with overgrowth. You can see how the giraffe tapers off on the right. But the number of species rises with succession, then stays fairly steady because the birds come back as long as they live, up to 11 years. In 1977, I started the Featherbed Lane Banding Research Station with 10 nets. I carried the equipment in a backpack and the holding boxes in my hands. And I sat on the ground in the shade of panicle dogwood shrubs. Not today. Ticks? What ticks? They hadn't become a problem yet. Deer were scarce. People joined me, both students at the university and town people. They were volunteers from heaven. Our station is now an octagonal picnic table built by a bander. It seats 4 pairs of banders and recorders. It's on a deck donated by another bander and built by her sons. There's a round table and chairs picked up at yard sales. And birds waiting to be banded are in individual bags hanging from poles and hanging from the rack on the table. Field 4, the farthest field from the main road, has an auxiliary station on a donated picnic table. So these are mist nets. When they're put up between shrubbery and hedgerows, the birds simply can't see them. Nowadays, during the breeding season, we operate 82 net spans divided into a 3-week rotation of about 30 nets each. Each week compares 2 different habitats in 2 different fields, like an open field with a shrubland or a shrubland with second growth forest, and shrubland with lots of fruit with shrubland with not so much fruit. This 3-week rotation is repeated 5 times from mid-May through August in connection with an international project called Monitoring Avian Productivity and Survivorship. In the fall, we compare 3 habitats simultaneously with 38 nets in 3 different habitats, and that's going on right now. And if you want to follow fall migration, look at birdcast.info, and you will see that's birdcast.info, and you will see live radar maps of the birds bursting up into the air after sunrise and sunset and beginning to migrate across the country. This is something set up by Cornell, and it's absolutely fabulous. We watch every night to see what our catch is going to be the next morning as they come down at daybreak to rest and feed. So that's what's going on right now. And here is a map of the rotations. Our first rotation is 3R and 10 and 10X. X means extension, where we put up more nets than we had at the beginning. And R simply means road. That's one rotation, about 30 nets. And number 2 is 2 and 2 extension and 2 edge. That's a old hayfield compared with woodland field 3 and 3X. That's number 2. And number 3 is 4S, which means stream, along a stream corridor, and 4H, which is along a hedgerow. And down the road off the map, we also worked in a pasture 40 years from use. So field 10 was 10 years from mowing at the beginning, and fields 2, 3, and 4 were each 20 years from last mowing or plowing. And as you will see, they were quite different. So we put up nets at sunrise, and we take nets down after 5 hours. Pack them up, take them home. We check the nets every half hour. So here is field 10. It's a sloping meadow at 10 years from last mowing, with its cohort of neotropical birds. The blue-winged warbler, indigo bunting, common yellowthroat on the left, yellow warbler on the right, yellow warbler with a baby on bottom left, and a yellow-breasted chat that seems to have caught me. The upper thicket was a catbird patch on the left. Now on the right, field 10 now looks like this as it's grown up into a second wood forest. The blue-winged warbler was the first to move out because it needs open shrubland. That means lots of grass and wildflowers and a few shrubs here and there, and they nest on the ground. Then the yellow-breasted chat moved out, then the bunting, which needs an open field, then the yellow warbler moved out, but the catbird persisted on the edge, and the forest and edge birds moved in, like wood thrush and rose-breasted grosbeak and towhee. Field 2, a 20-year-old hayfield, looks like this. It had wildflowers and little shrubs. The cohort of neotropical grassland birds was the common yellowthroat, the tree swallow, the barn swallow, the eastern meadowlark, and the blue-winged warbler. And catbird was in the shrubby edges. Catbird managed to be everywhere. But we used to have meadowlarks even overwintering in this field. And the field 2 is now a wooded shrubland, and the grassland birds have moved out, except one song sparrow, where we used to catch about 24 to 30 a year. There's one left, and one field sparrow. They just need the meadow to live. Field 3 was a 20-year cornfield, was an open shrubland at the beginning of the study, and it became Warbler City because the habitat was just right. And I actually have the dates when certain birds moved in. when the white-eyed vireo moved in, when I saw the first hummingbird, the first common yellowthroat in that particular field, the blue-winged warbler, willow flycatcher, chestnut-sided warbler, and yellow-breasted chat. So field 3 today is a second growth forest that shaded out the shrubs. The wood thrush and the ovenbird on the top use the forest floor. The ovenbird nests on the forest floor and makes a nest the shape of an old-fashioned oven, as you see in Europe, and that's why it's called an ovenbird. And the others are in the canopy: the red-eyed vireo, the great-crested flycatcher, scarlet tanager, and rose-breasted grosbeak. And large forest birds moved in, a sign of a healthy forest. Imagine this excitement, catching baby turkeys. Wow, how they could fly. And then this pileated woodpecker took 4 hands to get out of the net because it struggled so vigorously. And the hatch-eared broad-winged hawk, all you have to do is distract it so that the talons don't get you. Or put a bag over the talons and then put a bag over the bird's head, and then the bird is yours. But deer browse nowadays, with our overpopulation of deer, is a serious problem. This park-like woods that Field 3 is now should look like the woods on the right on Baldpate Mountain. The neotropical shrub and ground nesters are missing. The veery, the hooded warbler, the Kentucky warbler, the black and white warbler, and the chestnut-sided warbler are missing from Field 3, but they are breeders on Baldpate. In 2019 and 2020, I did something about it. I caged tree seedlings, little baby trees of 6 species that had not yet been deer nipped. In 2021, this summer, the Sauerland Conservancy planted 4 species of understory shrubs in 20 cages scattered throughout this field, so that we are rebuilding a forest with its canopy and its understory. And it's going to take a long time to have a restored forest, but it will be fun watching the birds come back as they discover it. Field 40, the 40-year-old abandoned pasture down the road from the map, was a wooded shrubland when I started, and it was Finch Place. Finches loved it. Again, to the left to right, going down, are the towhee, northern cardinal, indigo bunting, blue-winged warbler, common yellowthroat. The blue-wing and the yellowthroat we used to catch by the dozens in that field. And, you know, I would band birds before going to work, and I had to hurry up to get the catch done. There were so many. Field 40 is now a second growth woodland that grew out of reach before there were too many deer, so that the understory didn't get all chewed out. It has the neotropical forest, the bird species shown before. Now, the interesting thing about these data are that the banding data showed the same effects of field succession as the singing male census did. For nesting, vegetation structure was more important than vegetation species. That's why we need to conserve habitat at all stages to keep the maximum number of species of birds. You've probably heard that shrublands and grasslands as habitats are endangered habitats. The emphasis has been on keeping forests, but now conservationists are they're catching on about the importance of the grasslands and the shrublands. So the birds liked the vegetation structure during the breeding season. And to be a haven for a diversity of species, fields need to be, as I was just saying, managed to stay as open shrubland with saplings no more than 10 to 20 years into succession. And the fields need to be mowed in open areas to maintain grasses and wildflowers, and called to encourage native shrubs and prevent takeover by introduced shrubs. And they need to be logged as those saplings grow into poles. And there needs to be some source of water. Now I had 3 controls. Being an experiment, you have your experimental groups, and you always have to have your controls. So I had 3 controls. I census 3 adjacent woodlots, and this one is called very brushy because there were so many veeries in it. It's a 60-year second growth woodlot just on the edge of the Lindbergh estate, going down where Featherbed Lane extended beyond the pavement down to Amwell Road. And left to right, we had the neotropical veery, the black and white warbler, both of whom are ground nesters, the wood thrush, the eastern wood pewee, scarlet tanager, and Baltimore oriole. The second control woodlot I dubbed Wet Woods. Of those who know Hopewell Wurtsville Road, this is the Wet Woods just before Minella's Hillbilly Hall. It's a logged woodlot. The colonial people used it for wood, and the water table is so high it has vernal pools. And certain birds just loved it. In addition to the neotropical ovenbird, a ground nester, there was the red-eyed vireo and the house wren. And when their tadpoles have hatched every spring, grackles come in, crows come in, the broad-winged hawks come in, blue jays come in to nab what tadpoles they can catch from the edges of the pools. And then if the pools dry out, there are wiggling, squirming, dying tadpoles, and everybody comes in and feasts. The third control woodlot I called wood thrush woods because that was the dominant species. It was a climax woodlot with beech trees and other hardwoods, and it was last logged in 1905 to build the farmhouse on the site. And there's a certain thing about climax woods. By definition, it's going to be basically a beech forest. And you can see the little beech suckers growing out of the parent beech roots. That's how, the parent nurses the little ones until they are big enough to be independent. So you have a parent beech tree, and then there's a ring of little babies around it. But this wood is also compromised by deer browse. There's virtually no shrub layer and only sparse ground cover. All the wonderful ephemeral spring wildflowers are eaten away by the deer. So the woods serve only as a corridor between more suitable habitats. Furthermore, about 200 great hardwood trees fell in all 3 control woods, starting with Hurricane Irene in the summer of 2011, followed by that freak October wet snowstorm where tops of trees were snapped off and shallow-rooted trees fell from the weight of the snow. And then we had Tropical Storm Sandy of 2012. 200 trees felled. And now, of course, we have this emerald bark beetle that's killed virtually all of the ash trees. So there are many more dead trees standing. So this is nature's own experiment. I'm watching how the birds utilize the open spaces. And I thought at one time, maybe, just maybe, tree seedlings among the falling branches can escape deer browse. Well, the answer is no, they cannot escape. So that's why I started caging the little seedlings with 5-foot tall cages of 2 by 3-inch mesh so that those naughty little muzzles can't reach in. And other controls were my horse pasture, a wet meadow, and active hay fields. Those of you who know those, that would be the Griffin farm. Okay, moving on. So to be a safe haven for neotropical birds, woods need to be large, ideally at least 240 acres in size, so you have a center of the woods. Or if it's small, it needs to be connected with corridors. It has to be wide in proportion to length because the first 218 yards into the woods are only an edge where raccoons and fox and brown-headed cowbirds can get in, and the ground nesting birds are not safe. Those birds are safe only in deeper woods. And it has to have a source of water and ideally carpeted with native ground cover for the sake of ground nesting birds and undisturbed by house lots, roads, dogs, and cats. A pet peeve of mine is houses built in the woods because their yards, their lawns are like holes in a sieve that let in cowbirds and other predators. And the DNR Greenway, the Sauerland Conservancy, and Friends of Hopewell Valley Open Space, and the county, all 4 of them are buying land as possible to connect parcels of land. Very important function. I published this old field succession project in 1987 while the fields were still distinctly different. The details and supporting data are in this paper. During the first 20 years, 1978 to 1999, you follow the green line, that's the total birds. You see how they shot up as the habitat became more suitable. Then we started having problems. Drought, record heat, another drought, very wet, record snow, which killed resident birds, ice, drought, etc. So you see these spikes and valleys as the fields and the attending birds had to weather the storms. And it was hard to say at first whether the decline was due to things happening, because at first birds came in with the succession and then they started declining. Was it happening because of local things, or were we really seeing effects of the international habitat loss? NextRad radar was showing a 40% decrease in bird masses crossing the Gulf of Mexico. And this was already seen between the 1960s and the 1990s. And then you have problems of causes of bird decline. Habitat loss is number 1, both here with development, and number 2, like cutting pastures for beef for McDonald's or for palm oil, taking away the migratory birds' winter habitats. That's number 1. And right close to it is cat kills. Would you believe feral cats and unattended domestic cats kill millions of birds a year? And then you have the window and tower strikes, and now big cities are monitoring the migrations through this broadcast radar and turning off the big building lights on the nights that the birds are expected to pass through, and that helps tremendously. Even that 9/11 tower with its beams up into the sky turns off to let the migratory birds that are trapped in the light beam get out and continue. You see, birds are attracted by light, and once they get into the light beams or the light around windows, they won't go out into the darkness, so they'll just fly around and around and bumping into the buildings, crashing into the window glass, getting themselves concussions. So light is a real problem during migration, and this is how we're trying to handle it. And the upshot is that pesticides is another big thing. There's big ag pesticides and home pesticides. The upshot is that more breeding birds are being killed than they can replace. So you have this shocking data coming out from Fish and Wildlife and Audubon and Cornell of 1.9 billion birds missing, birds that we had in the 70s that we don't have now. And that gets to be terribly serious, because there becomes a point where the birds cannot just keep it up, cannot keep their numbers up. So my data are used in many ways. It goes to the U.S. Geological Survey bird banding laboratory, where other researchers may use it. And our summer project is that monitoring avian productivity and survivorship, sponsored by the Institute for Bird Populations in California. And this is an international project because people in the Central and South American countries are doing the same thing, monitoring survivorship on the winter grounds. And so we're putting the two data together and coordinating the data with the habitat. What type of habitat promotes the best survivor? And then publications in the journals, and then Christmas count, Migration Day, New Jersey Breeding Bird Atlas and Records. There are many more nowadays. The data help save the fields in the first place. I wonder if any of you remember Gloria and Richard Smith, where they were probably before your time, but they lived in Amwell Township before they moved to Pennswood. And they were in touch with the conservation officers in the surrounding 5 townships. And she got them all together at a meeting and asked me to come and present my data. And this was the beginning of getting Summer Park preserved. And then the data were also used to have Summer Park designated as a New Jersey important birding area. And of course, National Audubon has taken that on, that it's a national important birding area. Another study published in 2000 was the use of successional habitat and fruit resources by birds during the fall migration. I told you that we were comparing 3 different net lanes that had different fruit composition, and I was trying to discern what fruit was favored by birds. And we found out the results were fabulous. And such a study of use of habitat by fall migrants is called stopover ecology. That's the buzzword, the jargon. You may have heard of it. So remember how I said in breeding season, the structure of the vegetation was more important than vegetated species. Well, in the fall, the opposite is true. The species are more important than the structure. other words, the birds want fruiting shrubs, and if possible, they want native fruiting shrubs. But here's a heads up that I want to spread to people taking out invasive shrubs on their property. In our zeal to remove invasive shrubs and vines, we have to be careful that we're not removing the food for migratory birds or the residents before the native replacements are mature. Excuse me. And this is tricky since it takes years for native bush to grow up and start producing. I mean, some spice bush that I planted 10 years ago are just beginning to produce in a big way, and they are very high in fat, and they support the migratory thrushes. Another long-term project is aging and sexing catbirds by external characteristics. And this is a lifelong project, and I hope to finish it before my life is over. The catbird was so common that no one in the bird banding world bothered to learn how to age and sex them until H.B. Suthers came along. I love challenges like that. Such demographic knowledge is important for their conservation. Who migrates first, males or females, young or old? Where do they spend the winter, together or separately? We found that many species of birds, males and females, separate, and some overwinter in Central American shrubland and some in forests. So you have to preserve both places if you're going to preserve a pair of birds. It really gets fascinating. But anyway, I published the first 15 years, yes, 15 years of data. Excuse me, my throat's acting up. With my son, Dan Suthers. He was a graduate student taking statistics, where they would do their homework using randomly selected numbers by machine. And I said to him, well, why not use real data? And I proposed the Catbird Project, and he proposed it to his professor, who was fascinated. So Dan and I got the first 15 years of data. And of course, you have to sort it out so that you have a data set that's clean, that you have the same measurements of every catbird in the data set. And then we used a thing called discriminant function analysis, which measurements and scores meant something. You know, as a biologist, you look at things and see that things in nature vary. They vary a lot. And you ask the question, does the variation have meaning? And so those are the things that I measured, like eye color and the amount of chestnut underneath the tail. And we ran this through discriminant function analysis, and we got about 85% correct answers for females and about 87 for males. Well, the bird banding lab wants at least 95% correct answers before they will adopt the technique. So, okay, the next step, the next 12,000 catbirds, I gave the data to Margaret Fritz, a master's candidate at Rutgers, and we asked the question, if we know exactly the age of the bird, which we learned how to tell by their molt on feathers, if they retained baby feathers or not, you get birds of exact known age and measure all 16 things on them, and you know, because they're breeding, whether they're male or female, and run that through discriminant function, we found we were close to 100% right on. We cracked the code. And now the remaining question is, when you have baby catbirds in their first fall and they've gotten their first fall plumage, they've molted all the baby feathers into what we call the first fall plumage, or their, can we tell from them who's male and who's female? And the catch there is enough baby birds have to live, and they have to come back, and they have to be caught. And the glitch is that for most birds, up to 80% of the babies are lost during the first 6 months of their lives with predation and migration hazards and things like that. So it's taken a while to get enough birds to run through the discriminant function analysis, but I think I have it now. So here's what I was talking about. The juvenile catbirds have brown eyes and pink mouths. You can clearly see that. And so we can tell these babies from the adults. And I found some answers while banding neotropical migrants on their winter grounds in 4 Central American countries for 6 Januaries. See, all my bird banding work is volunteer. It is avocation. So I volunteered to go down with the graduate students during these tropical ecology courses, and I ran the net lanes for Dr. John Terborg for his book, Where Have All the Birds Gone?, published in 1989. And as an aside, during the same time, I collected fecal and soil samples and collected them a year around at Featherbed Lane for what became a breakthrough discovery. And that was the distribution of soil-dwelling amoebae, the dictyosteliads, the amoebae that I studied in the laboratory. I discovered how the same species are distributed throughout the world. Okay, the updated database in 2005 was used to designate the banding station and Sauerland Mountain as important bird areas. And currently data are used to show why that Penn East pipeline must not go through the Sauerlands. So we've cooperated with this MAPS project from the beginning in 1989, and we're still going. And one of my understudies, Tyler Christensen, founded an ongoing winter station on the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica. And these dots show where all the stations currently are that work during breeding season and during overwinter, over 1,400 stations. So here are the first 20 years again. We were wondering if the decline was real. Then West Nile virus came in 1999. And that took a big hit. And we had a crash in 99, and then we're slowly building up again, and then we have another crash, and our ups and downs. So this was the problem. Many more birds have died than were produced. And the decline implicates poor survival in the non-breeding season as well as here. For example, our northeastern wood thrushes overwinter in shade coffee farms and are holding their own in population up here. But the Midwestern wood thrushes who overwinter in what used to be forests that are now cleared for palm oil, So they're overwintering in scrub remains of these former forests. They aren't doing so well. They're failing. They're not finding enough food and shelter. And how do we know? By banding recaptures in both places, and by two ingenious new techniques, which I'll explain next. And here the tale tells the tale. This is called Avian Connectivity Project, determining where individuals breed and where they stop to molt and feed and overwinter. And wildlife preserves obviously need to be created in all these places to conserve the birds. And the map is showing the blue, the purple, red, and orange breeding grounds of Wilson's warblers that were captured in Central and South America. And so you see these guys overwintered down here, and these guys overwintered over here. And so you can see where you have to conserve land to conserve the species. And how we know is ingenious. Two tail feathers are pulled from our study birds. One is used for DNA analysis to determine which cohort the birds belong to, Eastern or Midwestern in our case. And the other tail feather is used to analyze stable isotope or heavy hydrogen, deuterium, which varies with latitude on the Earth. So you can pinpoint what group that bird belonged to and what latitude it grew up in. And then you've caught it down on its wintering grounds. You can say, aha, this is where the bird came from. It's absolutely ingenious. And we're helping with that. Another project that's ongoing is with the ticks. We see a lot of ticks on the birds' faces, particularly the birds that nest or feed on the ground. And these are the Ixodes ticks, the deer tick, the rabbit tick. And at first, one of my banders went on to be a professor at Carthage College, and she used them for her lab sessions. Again, why not use real data? And then later on, a Rutgers graduate student, Holly Vuong, working on her PhD, took the next batch of ticks and was asking the question, do the ticks give the disease to the birds, and do the birds distribute infected ticks? And the answer was ticks feeding on birds instead of mice were not picking up the Lyme's bacteria. No, they were not helping to spread the Lyme's disease. And then, of course, I keep on collecting ticks, and I gave some to Jim Ochi, who is studying tick-borne diseases. And then most recently, my ticks went to a Princeton graduate student. That's up to maybe 400 ticks a year. So the decline seen by 1999 was real. I've said, I've already explained that one. I'm going backwards. Okay, so here's another project we cooperated with, and that was the H5N1 bird flu virus. The question being, are migratory songbirds distributing the virus? And the researchers wanted to find out by doing cloacal swabs of songbirds in various stations across the nation, and then testing in the laboratory for the presence of the virus. And the results were negative. The migratory songbirds are not potential distribution vectors of avian flu. Phew, what a relief. All right, I seem to come, okay, I'm going the wrong way. I want to go this way. Okay, hybridization studies. A curious thing, these blue-winged warblers moved in at Featherbed Lane in 1974. That's when I detected the first breeding birds. And between then and now, hybrids have appeared repeatedly without the presence of golden wing warblers. See, blue wing crosses with golden wing and creates Lawrence's. And here you see a baby who's growing in his black face. So that was a curiosity. And the answer was that these blue wing warblers already had a distant history of hybridization. And there's a big debate in the literature and research on golden wing versus blue wing warblers. Is it one species separated by glaciation and they evolved to differ in appearance and now they're back together again and they're hybridizing? That's one theory. And another theory is that they were separate species coming together and hybridizing because they're close, that way back there was a common ancestry. So that's another study that's going around. And the current study that's in preparation is chickadee hybridization. There's a lot of work done at Villanova University about chickadee hybridization in Pennsylvania. It's done by Bob Curry. And he was demonstrating how the hybridization zone was moving northwestward out of Pennsylvania up to the Midwest. And I noticed something strange going on locally here. Nobody's done anything on New Jersey hybrids before us. And Lori Larson, who birded in Institute Woods, and I would exchange notes that the black-capped chickadee would come here to overwinter and then it would go north to breed. But then there came a time when it didn't. And the Carolina chickadees were moving north from South Jersey with the warming trend. They could stand it to overwinter here, and they hybridized. And what got us onto it was that my first sub-permittee of Princeton undergraduate was doing a project in Institute Woods where he noticed that the chickadees had funny wing measurements that didn't follow what should be for the species. And he said hybridization is possible. So that was the first alert in the 1970s. And then at my station, we started seeing funny looking birds. Looked black-capped, but they were tiny. Or they looked Carolina and they had these long tails. And so now here's a bird. Which one is this? Be careful. If you want to have some fun, see the chickadee quiz on the Featherbed website. You see, chickadees should have bright white edges on those wing feathers that have the dull gray edges, those little flight feather coverts. That's the first sign that you've got a hybrid, gray instead of brilliant white. And that tail has white on the edges, and a Carolina chickadee type hybrid will have that white edge, and pure Carolinas have all gray edges, etc., etc. We hope to publish soon. So that's what's going on. It's an ongoing project, and it just wouldn't be possible without these wonderful people who donate extraordinary amount of time. I mean, you get up an hour and a half or 2 hours before daybreak to be at the station by sunup, and then you put in about 7 hours of work. And if you have a flight, you put in more hours of work. And it's been wonderful. Some people have been with me for 20 years. And typically students will come and of course go when they graduate, but many of them have gone on to become biologists, which is always a delight to see. And then Washington Crossing Audubon Birdathon has helped me with mist nets and other large expenses. And Jim Irish comes and does bush hogging to keep the shrubland open and to keep the meadow as a meadow. And then the late Walt Protzman and a current volunteer, Sharon McGee, have taken these wonderful pictures. So that's it, folks, and I am open to questions. So Richmond, I guess.
So folks will need to unmute. Anna, you should click the stop share red button on your screen.
Okay. Oh,
There
yeah,
you go.
gotcha. You know, I got the folks watching. Hi, Larry and Sandy. Boy.
You make a gallery view.
Oh.
Great. Okay, so are there any questions, any comments? I mean, I have to say personally, I'm not a birder, but I like birds. And I was just awestruck at the kind of enthusiasm and the breadth and width and depth of your knowledge and your passion for it. It's thrilling. And I'm not even a birder.
Thank you.
So how about others? Anyone else want to comment or ask a question? Yeah, Sally, go ahead. You have to unmute yourself, Sally. Sally, unmute yourself. There.
Okay. Hannah, somewhere along the way, you said you had a funny story.
Oh, okay. it's somewhat risque, but it's absolutely hilarious. You remember it was on that slide showing that steep bank in Guatemala where we were walking up to our net lanes?
Okay.
Oh, okay. So one morning I got Turismo or Montezuma's Revenge. And I didn't have the runs, but I was touched in the gut and I was feeling kind of weak. So I climbed that steep bank and sat along the net lane and had the students bring me my oatmeal for breakfast. And I sat there and they brought me the birds to process. And a catbird, wouldn't you know, a catbird I released. And doggone, if that bird didn't run down to my foot and run up my pant leg, inside my pant leg, all the way up my thigh. Now, what am I going to do this? It tickled, of course. But I happen to have one of these ingenious field pants that unfortunately aren't made anymore. They're made explicitly for women where you could Velcro open the crotch and all you had to do was squat. You didn't have to undress.
Okay. Okay.
So the grad students were looking down at me and I was looking up at them and I went, rip, I opened up my, and out flew the bird and they were drop jaw astonished. And so I looked up at them and I said, oh, and what shall I ovulate next?
Oh, that's a wonderful story. Thank you, Hannah. This has been fantastic.
Oh boy.
Enjoyed it very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Other questions or comments?
Well, Hannah,
Yeah.
you can hear me? Steve Schnurr.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the Pennswood campus?
Which campus?
Where we are here, Pennswood. Are you familiar
No.
with our grounds?
No, I'm not. I took a look at your website this afternoon, and I see you've got a lot of gardens, hedges, things,
Well,
forests.
we have some mix. We have some gardens. We have a very large meadow, but it's not native grasses. It's big blue stem grass.
That's a prairie grass. That's a goodie.
That is a goodie, you say?
Yeah, blue stem used to be in the tall prairie in the United States. And did
But-
you know that way back when New Jersey used to be prairie?
No,
Yeah,
no, I did not.
yeah, the New Jersey State Museum even found fossils of a prairie chicken in New Jersey. And so this
Mm,
big blue stem is remnant. We even had a patch of it in field 4 for a while. Yeah, so that's one of the native
So-
grasses.
well, that's so interesting to me because I had the sense it was a Midwestern, a prairie grass,
Yeah,
not native to Bucks County,
right.
but you're saying it is.
If you go back far enough in geological history.
Well, but
Yeah,
what,
not now.
but,
not
but,
now.
but not now.
Right.
What birds, like the grassland birds that I might hope to be there, bobolinks and meadowlarks and such, are not there. We haven't seen either, and quite a list of
Okay,
grassland birds. So and we're very disappointed. I'll speak for myself, in the diversity of birds here, especially lately. We're not seeing migrants at all.
Okay.
And I would just love to consult with you, or if you could visit and give us your appraisal of our situation. There have been a lot of plantings here since Penswood was established 40 years ago,
right.
very ambitious. They brought in, unfortunately, they're mostly trees from Asia, from Japan.
Yes, that's the problem.
Zelkova, which I understand has no value for our native birds. But could we consult maybe by phone, or would you like to be our guest here and walk
I'd
the
be
grounds
happy to
together?
go get Hannah. I'd be happy to bring her if she's willing to come and take her home.
Oh, well, I could refer you to a literature on things like this. For
Okay.
example, my first impression of big blue stem is that it's big. It's too tall for these bobolinks and meadowlarks. That you'd want a shorter grass. And there's Rutgers has a lot of literature on it, and so does Friends of Hopewell Valley Open Space. And in fact, Rutgers gives, I don't know if it's just passed or if it's coming. They give a webinar on how to make a grassland or how to make a shrubland. But the thing is, these beautiful plantings from Asia do nothing for our wild birds. And I can divert onto butterflies for an example. Butterfly bush provides nectar, but it doesn't provide places for the butterflies to lay their eggs, because the caterpillars don't eat butterfly bush. So you have you have a dead end like that. There are various other mismatches that the people at nurseries aren't going to tell you about. They don't even know about it. I think Duke Farms also has publications out because they've been doing experimenting on this very thing. And you can get a lot of information by looking these various places up on the web.
Could you name a couple of them again?
Duke Farms is one of them. DUKE. Doris Duke has this huge property near Belmead.
In Somerville, New Jersey.
Yes, New Jersey. Yes, where there's been a lot of experimental work going on, creating habitat for birds. And FOVOS, that's Friends of Hopewell Valley Open Space. or FOHVOS is the acronym. They regularly have webinars or
Mhm.
data pages on native things. And Rutgers, of course. So there are sources. I'd recommend going to the papers. I could send you some references. That would be better than me coming and talking.
Oh.
Actually, you get your
Okay.
because I'd have to glean from these things anyway.
Could you share your email address with us?
No, I'll get it to you, Steve.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
Sally Berkman has it also.
Yes.
And also
Okay.
Larry and Sandy probably do too.
Right. And as I cautioned in the talk, you'd have to proceed slowly. If the birds eat anything on the campus, you don't want to jerk it out before the replacement is already mature and fruiting.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have this period of starvation. I mean, I can tell you a story. One of the organizations here learned the hard way. They jerked out the invasives in hedgerows, namely autumn olive,
Mm-hmm.
some of these other things. And we lost a dozen pair of bluebirds because their food source was taken away before replacements were put in. So that's, no winterberry the winterberry wasn't mature until years later. Things like that you have to be careful with. But it's indeed a good thing to do. And another example to be careful with, I was just reading about echinacea. Is that how you pronounce it?
Mm-hmm.
Echinacea?
Echinacea, that purple coneflower.
Mhm.
You need Echinacea purpureum, not these fancy cultivars that your greenhouse people come up with, because the cultivars won't have the flowers and the nectar that the originals have, and they won't have the seeds. Like these tick seed sunflowers that goldfinches are so dependent on. You need the wild type because these fancy cultivars with prettier flowers just won't have as many seeds.
Mm-hmm.
So things like that you have to watch out for to make the changeover gradually and write out a plan for people succeeding you to carry on. But according to what Duke Farms has experienced, it's totally possible to make a real good turnaround on habitat. That's beautiful, and also functional. Yep.
I love your spirit.
Oh, thank you.
And your wisdom and all those years of
Absolutely.
experience.
Incredible.
Thanks.
So are there any other questions? If not, I'm going to draw this to a close. People will follow up with you by email, Hannah, and we are so grateful to you for your years and years of passion and enthusiasm and expertise that has obviously birthed, they say the sign of a master is not that he has many students, it's that he creates many masters. And I think we can say safely.
That's my attitude. People that follow me who exceed me in doing things and yeah, that they carry on. Yes.
Yes,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
You're irresistible.
Oh, thank you. Right.
So
Yeah.
let's give a Penswood welcome. There we go. Thank you so much, Hannah.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you, Hannah.
you.
It was fun.
Good.
Yeah.
And thank you, Sally, for all your work to put all
Oh.
this together.
Thank you,
My
Sally.
pleasure.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
thank you, Richmond, for talking me through the scary stuff.
Yes, thank you, Richmond and Marguerite. For
Thank
all
you,
the technical.
Richmond and Marguerite.
Yeah.
Okay, good night all.
Bye.
Good
Bye.
night.
Good night.